In Paris with the girls, extended to 2 weeks. Amazing time, the message read, chirpy and oblivious, like she was texting a girlfriend about brunch plans. Mark read it 3 times, thumb hovering over the screen like he was waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one, just that stupid pink heart emoji at the end, like it was some teenage summer fling and not a 30-year-old woman married to a man who had just refinanced their mortgage to pay for her mother's surgery and that new deck she couldn't live without. He didn't throw the phone, didn't scream. He just set his coffee down, half full, still steaming, reached for the small leather-bound notebook he kept in the kitchen drawer, and opened to the bookmarked page titled Exit Plan. There it was, contacts for the attorney, instructions for freezing joint accounts, and a line he'd written weeks ago that now felt prophetic. She'll trip over her own ego. Be ready. His fingers didn't shake when he typed the reply. Hope you and Chris are having fun. A divorce petition is waiting here. Send, block, then quiet. He stared at the kitchen wall for a full minute, just breathing, not angry, not sad, not even surprised. The truth was, he hadn't expected to feel this calm. He thought when it happened, when the lie finally showed its teeth, he'd fall apart. But no, he felt, what was the word? Cleansed. She thought she was clever, waiting until she was overseas to extend the trip. No room for confrontation, no messy scenes, just a grinning photo carousel of croissants, overpriced perfume shops, and wine glasses held by hands that weren't hers. Or rather, weren't hers alone. Mark stood, walked over to the door, and pulled down the key rack. Her set of keys, the ones with the glittery Eiffel Tower keychain he'd bought her years ago at the exact same spot she was now pretending to rediscover, he slid them off with surgical precision and dropped them into the junk drawer like expired coupons. Then he opened the fridge, poured out the sparkling water she never finished, and tossed her half-used curling iron into the box he'd mentally labeled evidence of absence. He'd warned her, in his own way, months ago, not with threats, but with silence. She'd stopped asking why he no longer checked her location or why he didn't care who Chris from spin class was texting during dinner. That's the thing about being underestimated. People confuse distance with passivity. But Mark, he wasn't passive, he was preparing. And, by the way, if you've gotten this far, take a second and hit subscribe. More than 97% of people just listen without it, and yeah, we notice. It helps the team keep making these. So if you're still here, stick around. It gets darker. The best part? She hadn't even read it yet. Time zones. She was probably clinking glasses with the girls right now, laughing in some rented penthouse while Chris photographed her like a loyal dog angling for a treat. She'd check her phone later, maybe on the flight home, maybe right before bed. And when she did, that bubble of hers would burst so fast it'd knock the beret off her smug little head. He wasn't going to fight. That's what she wanted. Tears, drama, bargaining, some show of possession to reassure her she still mattered. But no, Mark was going to do the one thing she couldn't counter. He was going to disappear from her life so cleanly, so thoroughly, that she'd choke on the silence. The phone buzzed. Her mother, then her father, then her mother again. He didn't even look, just swiped the notifications away and opened the banking app, transfer funds, isolate accounts, change password. It was all itemized in the notebook. Steps to take, people to notify, keys to revoke. He wasn't just reacting, he was executing. He glanced out the window. The neighbor's dog was digging again in the flower bed she'd planted. Mark didn't care. Let it dig. Let it ruin the stupid lavender she insisted would make the yard feel French. Let everything rot. This house wasn't hers anymore. And that's when it truly hit. She thought Paris was a vacation, a break, a flex. But Mark saw it for what it was, a mirror. She was showing him exactly who she was, and all he did was return the favor, with legal stationery and silence. The house had always been too loud. Not with shouting, not with chaos, just noise, her playlist echoing from the bathroom at 6 a.m., the blender roaring while she made her morning greens, and he sat trying to read the paper, the artificial laugh she used when on the phone with her sister, the way she stomped in heels from one room to the next like she owned the square footage down to the studs, that kind of noise. Now, the house was a vacuum. No heels, no blender, no music, Just Mark, walking barefoot on hardwood floors, carrying a cardboard box labeled "Her Stuff" in black Sharpie. The first thing in, her curling iron, still plugged into the upstairs socket, wrapped haphazardly around itself like it expected her return. Then the planner from the kitchen counter. He flipped it open. Inside, her Paris itinerary, each day color-coded. Friday's entry read, "Wine tour with C, not Chris, just C." The kind of abbreviation you use when you think you're being clever or secretive or both. That went in the box too. Next, the vanity drawer in the bathroom. Lipsticks she never wore for him. Perfumes she said gave her confidence. 3 bottles, one of them labeled in French. He dumped them in without care. He wasn't curating a memory box. He was removing clutter, scrubbing her from the space like she was mold in a corner. Downstairs, the fridge was full of her usual half-finished things. 1 LaCroix, 1 opened oat milk carton, 1 sad little mason jar of overnight oats that had expired 3 days ago. He opened the trash, tilted the shelf, and let it all go. The clatter felt final. Then the phone rang. Her mother. He let it ring out. 30 seconds later, her father. Then her mother again, this time a text. "She's panicking. She didn't think you'd actually go through with this. Please call her." Mark stared at the message like it was written in a language he no longer spoke. "Didn't think you'd actually go through with this." That line, that arrogance, that assumption that he'd always orbit her, no matter how far she drifted. He deleted the message, blocked the number. It wasn't anger. It was efficiency. The next morning, he woke before the alarm. Quiet, crisp morning air, the kind of chill that makes a man feel alive before the world gets to him. He made coffee, toasted a bagel, read exactly 1 article on the paper's front page, then walked out to the hardware store and bought a new deadbolt. The guy at the counter tried to upsell him on a smart lock. Mark declined. "Mechanical's fine," he said. "I want something that stays locked when I want it to stay locked." He installed it himself. The sound of the old screws grinding out was deeply satisfying, as if the house itself was sighing with relief. When the new bolt slid into place, clean, quiet, unbreakable, Mark stood there a second, palm still on the knob. That was the last point of entry she had. Not metaphorically, literally. The keys in her purse wouldn't work anymore. The garage code had been changed. Her old fingerprint login on the smart thermostat was gone too. All traces of her digital and physical scrubbed. He opened a drawer, pulled out the envelope he'd addressed to her parents' house. Inside, the divorce petition, already signed, already notarized. And a single USB drive. On it, the folder, photos, financial statements, timestamps. The kind of backup you create when you know pleading is coming. Because it always comes. There's a phase he'd read once after denial but before bargaining, where people flail. That's what was next. She was panicking? Good. Let her panic. Let her feel what it was like to stand outside a door she used to own, keys trembling in her hand, realizing for the first time the lock no longer turned for her. Control wasn't yelling. Control was doing all of this without needing her permission. He poured himself another cup of coffee, took the box of her things, and placed it by the front door. Then he sat in silence, looked around the house, and finally noticed how good it felt to breathe without someone else's perfume clinging to the walls. Mark wasn't looking for proof anymore. He'd already passed that threshold. What he needed now, what he knew would come, was confirmation. Not whispered, not hidden. Something so brazenly careless it would almost be funny, if it didn't reek of such deep disrespect. It arrived on a Sunday afternoon, as many betrayals do, quietly, wrapped in the innocent voice of a mutual friend. His phone buzzed, a screenshot, no message, just the image. He tapped it open. It was a public Facebook post from one of her friends, Natalie or Nicole, something with an N. Caption, "Paris Magic with my girls." There were 8 photos in the album. Eiffel Tower, macarons, wine glasses, all standard postcard filler. But the sixth one stopped him. It was her, sitting at a small round table outside a candlelit bistro, leaning in, head tilted, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at him in years. Across from her, holding her hand across the table like they were celebrating an anniversary, Chris. Chris, the gym buddy, the coworker she swore was gay, the one she said only talked to her about pre-workout powders and CrossFit. That Chris. Mark didn't zoom in right away. He stared at the full image like a photograph from a crime scene, observing the background, the details, candlelight flickering, two wine glasses, one half full, her hand resting in his like it had always belonged there. Then he zoomed in. There it was. Her fingernails, painted the same color she left with, same bracelet, same ring she used to toy with when she lied. And his hand? Not innocent. Interlaced fingers, skin on skin, that level of comfort you only reach after crossing every line. Mark let out a slow breath. It wasn't rage, it wasn't even heartbreak. It was precision, a jigsaw piece clicking into place, a theory becoming evidence. He saved the photo. Then he noticed there was more. He scrolled up. The original post's caption said "Girls Trip Vibes" and was geotagged at a luxury boutique hotel in Le Marais. The girls didn't seem to mind that a man was in the frame. In fact, he was in another one. Photo 2, this time by a fountain, arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder, the sun catching the back of her neck like a spotlight from the universe. Chris wasn't just in Paris. Chris was part of the trip, integrated, accepted, laughing in the background like he belonged. Mark didn't react outwardly. Instead, he walked to the upstairs office, opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, and pulled out the folder marked Div Prep. Inside, bank statements, travel receipts, phone records, printed call logs, highlighted text that stopped just short of admissions. He printed both photos, one by the fountain, one at the dinner table, tucked them in the folder, page protectors and all. Then he added a sticky note, "Girls Trip." Cute. The word vibes lingered in his mind like a sour aftertaste. That's what she'd called it, a vibe, like the destruction of trust was just a mood, a disposable aesthetic, like marriage could be paused for fun and resumed like a Netflix series. Mark sat down and opened her Instagram, public again, after weeks of being private. She'd forgotten, probably, or assumed he wasn't watching anymore. Her latest story, a boomerang of clinking wine glasses, no tags, no faces, just 3 hands, one unmistakably his wife's because of the ring. The other 2, one had a masculine wristwatch. The other had a manicure she wouldn't shut up about last month. He took a screenshot, saved it. He wasn't building a case to convince her. He wasn't going to throw it in her face or demand an apology. No, this was insurance, the kind you show to a lawyer when you want to skip the part where she cries and swears it wasn't physical, because it was, and it was public. He put the folder away, locked the drawer, and exhaled deeply. Some betrayals are private, secret affairs, whispers in the dark. But this was a parade, and she was throwing roses at herself from the float. That was the real violation. Not that she cheated, that she assumed he'd be too dull, too polite, too trusting to see it. She'd miscalculated the quiet man, and he was done playing dumb. The phone rang just after noon, an unknown number. Mark nearly let it go to voicemail, but something about the area code caught his attention. Not local, not spam, out of state. He answered with a curt, neutral hello. The voice on the other end cracked before the second word. Is this Mark? He knew immediately. Soft, hesitant, raw in the way only someone freshly gutted can sound. There was no need for her to introduce herself, no need to confirm. He recognized her from the holiday party 2 years ago, the one where Chris awkwardly stood too close to his wife during the charades. And this woman, his +1, had spent most of the night pretending not to notice. Speaking, Mark replied, calm, dry, a shaky inhale, then the break. I saw the pictures, she said, the Paris ones. I didn't want to believe it, but it's all there, isn't it? He leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the drawer that held the folder. The ink was still fresh on the printed screenshots, still warm, metaphorically speaking. It's all there, he said simply. There was silence on her end, but not the empty kind. It was the kind of silence that floods with images, memories, suspicions, all the things you thought were just in your head suddenly forming a parade. Mark knew that silence well. I thought maybe he was just helping her take the photo, she whispered, barely audible. You know? just leaning in for the frame. But then I saw his hand, and the ring. I knew. She was crying now, trying to muffle it, failing. He didn't try to comfort her. That wasn't his role. Sympathy felt dishonest anyway. They weren't allies, just co-survivors, victims of the same collision, crawling out of the wreck from different sides. I mailed the divorce packet yesterday, Mark said. Documents, screenshots, the works. She sniffed. You already filed? I've been preparing, he said. Paris was just the final proof. You may want to do the same. A pause, long, heavy, then quietly. I will. Mark could hear her sit down, maybe on the floor, that sound people make when their legs no longer support their denial. I feel stupid, she said suddenly. I believed him when he said he worked late, when he said your wife was just the married one at the gym. I mean, he mocked her to me, said she was too uptight to ever cheat. Mark exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. She told me he was gay. That got a small, bitter laugh through the tears. Jesus Christ. Yeah. For a moment, they just sat there on opposite ends of a phone call that neither of them wanted to make, both staring into the shattered version of a life they thought they'd secured. And beneath it all, that strangest of emotions, relief. The kind you feel when a lie ends, even if the truth is ugly. She's still in Paris, he said. Probably won't know I've blocked her until she tries to scan her boarding pass and realizes the Uber account doesn't work. I froze our joint card this morning, she said. He's probably still trying to impress her with dinners I'm paying for. You'll feel better once it's done, he said flatly. Will I? She asked. He didn't answer. That wasn't his burden. Closure is a solo sport. After a moment, she spoke again. Thanks for picking up. I didn't know who else would get it. Everyone keeps telling me to wait until he gets home. Talk to him face to face. I used to believe in that, Mark said. Now I believe in documents. There was a pause, then a quiet, take care, followed by the click of disconnection. Mark didn't move right away, just stood there, phone still in hand, staring out the window where a squirrel was tearing apart one of her hanging plants. He didn't stop it. The thing had been dead for weeks anyway. Fake lushness, brittle underneath, fitting. He opened the folder, added a sticky note with the date of the call. Confirmed. Mutual damage. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a ripple effect, a shared detonation, one that tore through two homes, not just one. She didn't know it yet, but Chris's wife had just become the one person in the world who would understand exactly what it felt like to stand next to a lie wearing a wedding band. And Mark, he didn't feel sorry for her. He just felt done. The knock came early, not angry, not urgent, just persistent. 3 slow raps like someone unsure whether they belonged there at all. Mark glanced at the security monitor before opening. Her mother, of course. Floral blouse, hair half done, sunglasses hiding the puffiness beneath her eyes. She clutched a leather handbag like it contained a weapon she wasn't brave enough to use. He debated not answering, let her stand there and stew in the awkwardness of defending the indefensible. But something in him wanted to hear the excuse, not because he cared, but because every ridiculous word she offered would chisel the final layer of doubt from his resolve. He opened the door just wide enough for conversation, one foot planted behind it. Mark, she said, eyes already watering, I know this is... Look, she made a mistake. She wasn't thinking. It was just a trip. Just a trip, he repeated, his tone arid as dust, with her hand in another man's across a Paris bistro. A trip. She didn't mean for it to go that far, her mother rushed out, the words tumbling over each other in desperation. She said she was overwhelmed. She was just trying to breathe, to feel like herself again. Does she usually breathe through someone else's mouth? That shut her up for a second. Mark tilted his head. Did she tell you about Chris, or did she just ask you to come clean up the mess she left behind? Tears slipped out from behind the sunglasses. She's panicking. She's not sleeping. She's saying she didn't think you'd actually follow through? He cut in. Yeah, that sounds like her. Her mother gripped the handbag tighter. Can't you just talk to her first? Before the lawyers? Before the paperwork gets too... I did talk to her, Mark said, voice flat. I talked to her when I asked if Chris was just a gym buddy. I talked to her when she came home late 3 nights in a row. I talked to her when she said she needed space and chose a city famous for affairs. She regrets it, the woman whispered, like the words themselves were an offering. She really does. No, Mark said quietly. She regrets being caught, not what she did. A long silence passed. Her mother looked smaller now, like the weight of representing someone else's sin was physically collapsing her spine. She's still your wife. For a few more weeks. And after that, you're just going to walk away like it meant nothing? He smiled, cold. Oh, it meant something. It meant I gave 10 years of loyalty to someone who saw marriage as a mood. The mother blinked rapidly. Her mouth opened to argue, then shut again. Mark could see it in her eyes, the moment she realized he wasn't bluffing. That the polite, quiet, agreeable man she'd always thought was too passive for his own good had already changed the locks, moved the money, filed the paperwork, and printed the evidence. She was too late. They all were. He took a step back and began to close the door, then stopped just before it latched. One more thing, he said, not looking at her. If you come again, come with a return label for her box of lies. It's waiting in the garage. He closed the door gently. No slam, just the soft finality of a man done explaining himself. Behind him the house was still. No echoes of perfume, no screeching drawer where she kept her hair ties. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the wall clock marking time she no longer had. He didn't need to win an argument, he already had the verdict. The call from her attorney came mid-morning, polite, polished, and already playing defense. Mark recognized the tone instantly. Lawyers always started smooth when they weren't sure who held the bigger knife. Mr. Caldwell, the voice said, this is Jeffrey Sandberg, counsel for your wife. I just received your petition, and I have to say, I'm a little surprised at how thorough it is. Mark sat back in his chair, one hand resting on the manila envelope he'd prepped weeks ago, now empty, its contents already delivered, evidence, copies, notarized statements, printouts, and, yes, a photo of her and Chris with that caption, girls' trip vibes, bright and stupid and damning. Sandberg continued, you've got full documentation, time-stamped images, financial anomalies, travel receipts, even a log of her messages to this. Chris, that's a lot of preparation for someone blindsided by a vacation announcement. Mark let the silence sit just long enough to sting, then said evenly, I had time to prepare while she posted girl power selfies from rooftop wine tastings. There was a pause, not the kind of pause where someone thinks. The kind where they realize they've underestimated the man on the other end. Well, she was under the impression you might be open to reconciliation, that emotions were high, and perhaps we could discuss an informal agreement before anything permanent. I'm not interested in discussions, Mark interrupted. I'm interested in clean exits. She's confused, Sandberg tried. She believes there may have been a misinterpretation. Mark gave a dry laugh. That's a hell of a word for holding hands with your gym buddy at a candlelit dinner in the most romantic city in the world. Sandberg coughed lightly. You understand that, from a legal perspective, infidelity without explicit physical proof can sometimes be difficult to prove. I have the photos, I have the airline records, I have the credit card charges, I have the texts, I even have the phone call from Chris's wife, if you want a witness statement. He paused. You can test me, Mr. Sandberg, or you can advise her to stop playing offense with a broken weapon. Another pause, this time longer. Then the lawyer sighed, audible through the receiver. She assumed you'd wait. Mark looked out the window. The sun was cutting sharp shadows across the grass she used to obsess over. She assumed wrong. More silence. Finally, Sandberg said, We'll proceed formally then. I'll speak with her. Do that, Mark said, and ended the call. He leaned back in the chair, let the silence fill the room again. It was his favorite part of the day now, that moment right after a conversation ends, when someone on the other end finally understands they aren't dealing with a doormat. She hadn't prepared because she never thought she had to. In her mind, Mark was static, predictable, soft-spoken, loyal by default. But what she never understood, and what her lawyer now fully did, was that quiet men don't stay still. They calculate. And by the time you notice their absence, they've already moved the ground beneath you. In the folder marked Final Phase, Mark had listed everything. Timelines, dates, potential counters, clauses in their prenup she never bothered to read, but had initialed anyway. His attorney had been almost giddy reviewing the materials. You're 10 steps ahead, she'd said. Most men show up here with nothing but accusations and tears. You brought blueprints. That was the point. While she curated envy on social media, he curated an exit that would make recovery impossible. She used time as a playground. He used it as a weapon. And she was just beginning to feel the cut. The Uber dropped her off at 6:42 p.m., the exact time her flight itinerary had predicted, and the first thing that didn't feel off since the moment she left Paris. The trip home had been quiet, not somber, not reflective, just off. Something about the way Chris wouldn't make eye contact at the terminal, the awkward hug, the lack of promises. She told herself it was post-vacation fatigue, jet lag, maybe even guilt. Not about Mark. She hadn't fully admitted anything to herself yet, but about the sheer recklessness. The photos, the captions, the wine-drunk videos. There had been a moment halfway through the second week when she considered pulling them all down. Too many people followed her, too many connections. But then she thought, I'm not doing anything wrong. And that had been enough. Until she stood in front of the house with her rolling suitcase and realized the key didn't fit, she blinked. Tried again. The key turned halfway, then jammed, like it was rejecting her. She frowned and jiggled it, then stepped back and looked at the deadbolt. New. Brass still shiny. The door looked the same, but it didn't welcome her anymore. She tried calling, straight to voicemail twice, then a third time out of pure denial. The robotic voice on the other end was different now. No more, "You've reached Mark." Just a stock system message, as if he'd erased even his voice from her world. Still standing on the porch, she texted, "Hey, I'm home. Did something happen to the lock?" No response. She stared at the bushes, trying to see if a neighbor had noticed her. No one. Just the faint whir of a lawnmower 2 houses down and the rustle of the American flag hanging limp in the still air. The fourth time she tried calling, the call didn't even connect. He'd blocked her. That's when the dread crept in. Not panic, not yet, but the icy pinch of realization that something irreversible might have happened while she was busy hashtagging her vacation bliss. She called her mother. He answered instead. Not Mark, her father. "Your mother's here," he said carefully, "and there's a folder for you." "A what?" "At the house. We thought you should see it here." Mark dropped it off. She didn't respond, just stood there, trying to put oxygen back into her lungs. Her father continued, "Do you want us to come pick you up?" She said no, then yes, then no again. Finally, she whispered, "I'll get a ride." When she arrived at her parents' house, the lights were already on. Her mother met her at the door, teary-eyed but silent. No hugs, just a nod toward the dining table where the folder sat. Cream-colored. No name. But she knew it was for her. She opened it with trembling hands. Divorce petition. Printed screenshots, Paris photos, captions, comments, even a message thread between her and Chris that clearly wasn't meant for anyone else to see. Tucked between the pages, a single house key, detached from the Eiffel Tower keychain she always used. No note, no explanation, just absence. Her mouth went dry. She looked up, but no one was saying anything. Her mother stood there like a statue. Her father sat on the far edge of the couch, staring into the dark screen of a turned-off TV. "This is dumb," she tried. "He can't." But she couldn't finish. Because yes, he could. And he had. The house wasn't hers anymore. The silence wasn't a punishment, it was the new status quo. She reached into the folder again, hoping for something, anything. A message, a photo, a scrawl of his handwriting. Even a cruel post-it would have been better than nothing. But there was nothing. Just evidence. And finality. She pressed her thumb to the divorce papers. The notary stamp glinted under the dining room light. The entire thing felt foreign, like she was walking through someone else's nightmare. But it wasn't someone else's. It was hers, and he was already gone. The first email hit his inbox at 2:07 a.m. Subject line, "Please." No greeting, no punctuation, just her name and the signature line like she was still entitled to that space. He didn't open it right away. He didn't need to. He already knew what it would say. At 6:31 a.m., the second one arrived. It wasn't what it looked like. By 8:15, a third. "Please talk to me before the lawyers do." He skimmed them while sipping his coffee. They all blurred together into a slurry of panic-drenched phrases. "I panicked. I just needed space. Chris was supportive. I felt invisible. You were always so distant." One stood out from the pile, short, desperate, written like a real-time plea between sobs. "Why are you doing this?" That one, he forwarded to his lawyer. No commentary, just the subject line and her message, as cold and clean as a court document. Then he archived the rest. The voicemails came next, half whispered, half hysterical. She oscillated between wounded confusion and manufactured composure, like she was auditioning for a reconciliation that only existed in her head. Mark, I know you're hurt. I know you're angry, but please, can we just talk? Just you and me without the noise. You blocked me, and I get that, I do. But this doesn't have to be the end. It wasn't real with Chris. It was just wine and a long pause. Then, I messed up, but not like that. You know me. That line, you know me, landed like a cracked mirror. Because yes, he did know her. That's what made all this possible. Every move she made was as predictable as it was insulting. By noon, she was messaging his sister, then his old college friend, then the mutual friend who'd sent him the pair of screenshots in the first place. Her strategy was obvious. Flood the zone, hope someone would soften him, crack his shell, nudge him toward a conversation. But they all knew better, because Mark didn't rage. He didn't rant. When Mark went silent, it meant the door was already shut. Deadbolt turned, hinges reinforced. That evening, his phone rang again. Her father. He let it ring 4 times, then picked up. Mark, the old man said, his voice softer than usual, tired in the way a father gets when he's cleaning up his daughter's disasters for the 100th time. I know you're upset, I know this hurts, but you're being, well, harsh. Mark didn't speak right away. He let the weight of that word settle in the space between them like dust. Then calmly, not harsh, just done. There was a long sigh on the other end, not disappointment, just defeat, the kind that comes when someone realizes you're no longer participating in the game they thought would go on forever. She made a mistake, her father said. People do. Marriage means weathering things. Mark looked around the quiet house, the one she'd filled with her voice, her perfume, her rules, and now, finally, it was still, peaceful, honest, empty in the best way. Marriage means not turning it into a vacation from consequences, he replied. She bet I'd wait. I didn't. Another silence. The older man cleared his throat, maybe trying to muster one last defense, but it never came. I hope you know this wasn't easy for us, he said finally. Mark nodded, even though the man couldn't see it. It was harder for me, but I still did it. He hung up. No drama, no parting words. Later that night, he checked his inbox again. One final message. I miss us. He didn't open it. He just selected it with the others, dragged them all into a folder titled Echoes, and closed his laptop. Let her spiral. Let her fill the void with pleas, half-truths, and rewrites of history where she was misunderstood, overwhelmed, swept up in some romance novel that wasn't her fault. He wasn't interested in correcting her story. He was simply no longer in it. She was leaning against the hood of a car that wasn't hers, arms folded tightly around her stomach like she was holding herself together with the last bit of gravity she had. The office building cast a long shadow over the lot, and Mark saw her the moment he stepped out. He didn't flinch, just kept walking toward his car, keys in hand, as if she were another stranger loitering near a curb. She called his name once, softly, then again, louder. Mark, please. He paused only because she stood directly in his path. Mascara trailed down her face like the remnants of something once put together. She looked tired, not devastated, unprepared, like someone trying to deliver a monologue they hadn't rehearsed. We can fix this, she said quickly, as though if she said it fast enough the words would slip past his defenses. Mark didn't answer, just looked at her the way a man might look at a locked cabinet he no longer needed the contents of. Mild recognition, no urgency. You had 2 weeks to think, he said, tone like steel under velvet. I had 2 to prepare. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I panicked. I didn't think you'd actually... Mark, it was just Paris. Just stupid fun. I wasn't running away. He tilted his head. You thought it was a vacation. I made it a transition. She grabbed his arm then, not forcefully, just the way someone does when words start failing. Her fingers curled weakly around his sleeve like they could rewind time by clinging to fabric. I didn't sleep with him, she whispered. He pulled his arm back, not violently, not dramatically, just enough to create space that now felt permanent. You didn't need to, he replied. You handed him what mattered, your presence, your time, your story. Her lips trembled. I didn't think it would go this far. That's the problem, he said. You didn't think. You performed. She blinked, unsure how to respond. There it was again. That wall she'd run into before. The one she thought would crumble if she cried hard enough, begged convincingly enough. But it stood. The pictures weren't meant for you to see, she murmured, as if that would reduce the offense. Mark actually smiled at that, cold, bemused. You weren't hiding them. You just assumed I wouldn't look. A gust of wind swept her hair across her face. She looked thinner, smaller than he remembered, but he didn't mistake that for fragility. He knew now it was emptiness, the kind that comes from being seen without the mask and realizing the performance is over. I want to come home, she said quietly. He gestured toward the building behind him. You're standing outside my office, not my home. That tells me all I need to know. Tears welled again. Don't you miss anything about us? He nodded. I miss believing I mattered to you. And with that, he turned. No slam. No final shout. Just a man walking away from the wreckage without looking back. She didn't chase him, not because she didn't want to, but because, for the first time, she understood the rules had changed. Her cries no longer triggered compromise. Her apologies had no currency. The story wasn't hers to steer anymore. He drove away in silence, her silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror. Not a villain, not a victim, just another person who assumed consequences were optional. She had gambled with loyalty, and loyalty had left the parking lot. It came in a thick manila envelope, no return address. Certified, signed for by her mother, who left it on the foot of her bed with a look she didn't explain. She'd been back home for weeks now, reduced to a guest in the house she once escaped with such confidence, now sleeping beneath a poster of a boy band she used to idolize and a crack in the ceiling she used to stare at when imagining her perfect life. She thought stupidly maybe it was the closure she'd been asking for. Maybe he'd finally written something, an explanation, a confession that he still loved her, a signal that this had all been too fast, too cold, and that maybe, just maybe, there was still a sliver of us left to save. But there was no letter inside, just a single photo. She pulled it out with shaking hands, eyes already stinging from the anticipation, breath held like it might control the outcome. There he was, Mark, on a small boat, hair wind-blown, sunglasses perched crooked on his nose like he didn't care, grinning wide in a way she hadn't seen in years. Next to him sat Chris's ex-wife, one arm draped over a kid's shoulder, the boy she vaguely remembered from a holiday barbecue years back. The girl beside them was laughing, mid-motion, like she was trying to splash someone. Mark had his arm around the boy, steadying him against the sway of the boat. They looked whole. No performance, no pretense, no Instagram-ready pose, just joy, genuine, unfiltered, and absolutely real. She flipped the photo over. Scrawled in Mark's unmistakable handwriting were 10 simple words. Some trips change lives. Yours ended one. Mine started one. That's when the room caved in, not with noise, with silence, total, brutal silence. The kind that settles in after your illusions finally die and leave your skin cold. The kind that hums louder than crying. The kind that feels like a locked door. Because that's exactly what it is. Her phone lay beside her on the blanket.
She hadn't received a reply in over 3 weeks. Every text still sat on delivered, none on read, none answered. She tapped the screen anyway, opened the thread, scrolled back through her own dissent.
Please call me. Can we just talk? You can't throw everything away over one trip. You know me, you know me. All still blue, all still unread. Echoes screaming into a vacuum. Her mother knocked on the door once that evening, asked if she was hungry. She said no, didn't mean it. But the weight in her stomach wasn't food-related. She looked at the photo again, as if a second glance might reveal something crueler, some detail that meant it wasn't real. But there was nothing to find. Just a man who used to orbit her world now sailing through his own. She whispered to no one, "That should have been me." And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a plea, they felt like a sentence. The window was open. A breeze tugged at the corner of the photo in her lap. She didn't move, just stared at the ink on the back, the final message from a man she once believed would wait forever. But he didn't wait. He watched her leave and chose to live. She'd treated their marriage like a pause button. He'd treated it like a decision. And now she was just a memory. one that no longer returned calls.